Welcome to Visa Game Plan. Let us be your migration coach. Keith, how are you today?
I'm very well, Amasha. Very excited to dive into all things employer sponsorship with you. What are we going to discuss today?
Today I thought we should dive into a bit of client stories that we've had in relation to the finance industry and how we've helped our clients navigate their PR pathways through the employer sponsorship aspect.
Particularly with the occupation of accountant, right? We've
Correct.
helped a lot of accountants get 482s in the last year.
Correct.
I think to set a bit of background, basically when the government tightened skill migration last year and also brought in the rule that says that after you go onto your 485, that's your temporary graduate visa, you can either go into permanent residency or an employer sponsorship, but you can't go back into a student visa. So that's caused a lot of clients to have an exact 2-year deadline where you get your 485 and in 2 years you either get PR or an employer sponsorship or you have to go back to your home country, unfortunately. So that's caused the 482 visa scheme to become very prominent and popular, and also, as we know, there are a lot of temporary migrants with the accountant skill who are struggling to get PR, so a lot of them are looking at the 482 visa scheme as well. Are there any other visas apart from the 482 in the employer-sponsored category?
Yeah, definitely. So we have a couple of subclasses when it comes to the employer-sponsored category. We have the training visa, which is the subclass 407, and then we have the subclass 186, which is the employer nominated permanent scheme visa, and then also we have the subclass 494 visa, which is more of a regional visa.
Yeah, definitely. I think the main popular ones are at the moment 482s and then 186s. The 407 training visa is quite popular as well. So why don't we move into having a discussion about the type of clients we've helped? What industries have these clients been in, and how have they gone about sponsoring the accountants for their companies?
That's a very good question. So we've actually helped accountants not just in the field of finance, but then as a firm we've helped accountants in the field of charity, cleaning companies, security firms. Remember, Keith, we had this client who came from a charity, and then we actually...
The one from the Northern Territory,
Northern
right?
Territory one, yes.
Yeah, I think there's a common misconception out there that says that if you don't work for a financial services firm, or if you don't work for like an accounting firm, then getting sponsorship as an accountant is basically impossible. But we've obviously proven otherwise by numerous successful grants. I think the real difficulty with accountants is if you're working for a smaller firm that's not actually an accounting firm or a financial services firm, then getting sponsored as an accountant's a bit tough. That's because of the caveats that this occupation attracts, right? Do you want to walk me through the limitations of being sponsored as an accountant, or the caveat?
Definitely. So when it comes to accountants, there are three main caveats. So the first caveat would be the accountant cannot really perform low-skill tasks, like tasks of a bookkeeper, clerical accountant.
Like accounts payable, accounts receivable,
Correct.
payroll officer.
That's right. Yeah. And then the next caveat would be the company who's going to sponsor the particular accountant should have at least a $1 million turnover in that company. And then they should at least have 5 or more employees in the company, the organization structure.
5 or more full-time employees, right? Yeah, I think this is where this whole genuine position requirement comes in, right? So you need to first satisfy the caveats, and secondly, you need to prove to the department that the role of an accountant is genuinely needed in the company that is sponsoring you.
I think it would be very interesting if we can kind of dive a little more into the caveats so that we can discuss as to how we kind of come up with solutions as a firm to meet those caveats.
Definitely, I think so. Let's take the $1 million turnover caveat. That's a pretty easy one to look at, right? So you take the company's profit and loss for the last financial year, and if it has more than 1 million in sales, we satisfy that caveat. The second is we look at their payroll, and in their payroll, if they have more than 5 full-time employees, and you can also look at the organization chart, then we meet the second threshold as well. The real difficult caveat is whether the nominee is performing low-skill tasks such as bookkeeper's task, account payables, accounts receivable. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the risk of that particular caveat for smaller companies?
Yes, so when it comes to smaller companies, the organizational structure of that company could also be a little smaller. So for an example, let's say there's a cleaning company, let's say for an example, and then the accountant, the main role of the accountant is not very directly related to the cleaning company. But then our job is basically to kind of prove to the department that, look, the cleaning company is recruiting an accountant, but it's a genuine position basically, although it doesn't directly relate to the task that they do as a cleaning company in their day-to-day operations.
That's right, because the problem is if you have a very small organization chart, then the department might say that the person you're sponsoring as an accountant is actually doing a bookkeeper's job, doing the accounts payable work, the accounts receivable work, and not spending a substantial portion of their day-to-day tasks at the level of an accountant.
That also comes with, Keith, remember we had this case where there was one accountant recruited the company, but then there wasn't a team or there wasn't any delegates under that particular accountant. And then the department raised a question in relation to that.
Yeah, definitely. Like the problem that the department will have in those type of situations is if there is nobody working under the person that we are sponsoring as a accountant, then the department could potentially say, look, this person is performing the lowest skill tasks because there is nobody below them that can actually perform those low skill tasks. Or for example, if you have outsourced all of your tax accounting stuff to a tax accounting firm, then the department could say, okay, look, if you've outsourced those to a tax accounting firm and you don't have a junior doing your bookkeeping work, then you might not be spending 70% or more of your day-to-day tasks
Doing the assigned tasks, the
Correct.
tasks that align with the ANSCO basically.
Yes, correct. So that's definitely how you meet those caveats. So the caveat requirements is one of the biggest problems for an accountant. And the second is whether the accounting position is genuinely needed in the firm. So let's discuss the charity firm or the charitable organization that we did some work for and got a positive assessment out for an accountant. So basically, to set some context, Amasha, they were a Northern Territory based charitable organization, and they were receiving federal grants, federal and state grants to assist Aboriginal communities. And when they came to us, one of the biggest concerns they had was whether they can actually sponsor an accountant. And when we analyzed the case, we were able to see that they had a trust account and they had a large volume of transactions coming through the trust account, and that money was getting distributed back out to the community. So I was able to make a case and present it to the department saying, look, there's a lot of compliance work required in ensuring that this money is genuinely handled and distributed and that you meet all of your audit requirements because they're getting federal grants. And we were able to argue and say that compliance requirement alone, in addition to the other budgeting and reporting functions, meant that you genuinely needed an accountant in-house, and we were successful in getting it.
Yes, that was very interesting. And also, Keith, in relation to the other caveat of the $1 million turnover, practically when it comes to businesses, it's not like all businesses have a profit in their cash, in their statements basically. So remember the fintech company case we did where they had a huge loss in their financial statements, but we still managed to get the nomination granted.
Correct, yeah. Actually, by the time they came and consulted me, they had already gone and seen a few other lawyers who had looked at their profit and loss statement and said, look, you're suffering huge losses. So it's likely that the department will refuse this visa. But we were actually able to look at the balance sheet and see that there were a lot of investors that had provided non-current loans or had provided equity investments into this business because it's a fintech company, right? So they are a startup, they're trying to scale, so they're very cash hungry. So yes, in the first 5-10 years of their operations, they might have a loss, but they had a lot of investors willing to carry that loss. So yes, the 1 million turnover requirement is a sales requirement. But whether or not the company makes a profit is not what is material. Loss-making companies can still sponsor accountants or sponsor people on 482s. What is important to prove is how you are going to meet that nominee's wages. So if you're sponsoring somebody on a 482, let's say for 3 years, right, you need to prove that your cash flow, despite you making losses, is going to be sufficient for you to be able to afford those wages for about 3 years.
So it's more of the affordability of the company than the profitability in that sense.
Correct. You just need to prove that the company can meet its wage expenses and its expenses in general, and then the department's very willing to accept it because some companies take a long time before they meet profitability, but that doesn't mean they are unable to meet their cost.
They're not affordable, like they can't afford the nominee's wages. It doesn't mean that. So when it comes to wages, is there like a legal compliant when it comes to the wages of the particular nominee, or it could be any wage?
No, you can't actually, particularly, so this is why the 407 is a bit popular. If you're doing a training visa, there's no minimum wage requirement. But if you're doing a 482 or a 186 or even a 494 visa, you must pay the consolidated skilled income threshold. So as of the 1st of July, it's going to be $76,515 plus super.
Right.
So at the very least, you must pay the nominee that you're going to sponsor that. Otherwise, you will not be able to sponsor them for a visa under the employer-sponsored program. But there's also this Australian market salary rate requirement, right? In addition to that, when you're deciding how much you're going to pay them. Do you want to walk me through that?
Yeah, definitely. So when it comes to the AMSR, which is the Australian market salary rate, that is basically to say that the employer who's willing to sponsor the accountant is not paying something different to what they're paying an Australian resident worker. So that there is no discrimination in that sense, they are paying an equivalent wage. So there are a few ways that we can go about proving it, that the company is meeting the AMSR. So let's say for an example, there is an Australian worker who's performing the same task as the accountant in the firm. Then simply we can use the pay slips of the particular worker, and then we can convince the department, look, there is an Australian worker who's performing the same tasks. So then
And getting paid the same as well, right?
Salary. Yes. And then let's say there is no Australian worker in the company performing the same task in the same occupation, getting paid the same salary. Then we do stuff like we go analyze a couple of ads which we can find on Seek, Indeed. And
Those are these competitor ads for the same position, in the same location as well, right?
Correct.
And that is paying in the same range that you're willing to pay the nominee.
Definitely.
And then you can also use salary surveys, is that correct?
Yes, we use remuneration surveys like pay scale reports, Hayes salary guide. So we use those
Glassdoor also.
Glassdoor survey as well. So
You can also use the Bureau of Statistics, the jobs and skills.
job and skills in Australia. So we use all of that and kind of like try to identify if the accountant is paid within that range.
So you produce like a small report for the Australian market salary rate.
So like we as a firm, we spend a lot of time doing the annual market salary report, doing the research for it, because we need to ensure that the ads we find, the remuneration surveys are all accurate, and then they align with whatever the pay requirement of the particular nominee is that the employee is going to sponsor as an accountant. So we spend a lot of time doing that.
So for the employer-sponsored visa, the minimum salary payable is 76,515 plus super, but you also must prove that the salary that you're paying is the same you would pay an Australian employee, right? So it's two-pronged test. So I think, Amasha, in conclusion, to wrap up, why don't we just highlight the main requirements of a 482 visa? So you discussed that you must check and see whether there's a caveat, like the occupation of accountants have caveats. 2, you must prove that the company can afford the nominee's wage.
Correct.
3, we said that we must run a labor market test, which is a 4-week advertisement that we must post on 2 public platforms and prove to the department that no other Australian employee can be recruited to do this job. Then
it's important in the labor market testing advertisement that we have the same salary range, the same occupation, and the location, everything mentioned out in the
even the position description should be put up in the
it need to align with the ANSCO job description, so we need to be very careful when we draw up the advertisements for the LMT.
Right, and then the 4th thing that we needed to prove was that the annual market salary rate is required, is met rather.
Yes.
So I think in the last year we've done about 10 successful accounting and finance industry related sponsorships, which has been quite great, particularly given how difficult it is to get this occupation.
That it was in unrelated industries. It was very interesting.
Fantastic. So I think we should catch up another day and discuss further. So we are looking forward to continuing the visa game plan journey with our clients. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. That's it at Visa Game Plan today. See you next time.